Cuban security forces, essentially like the Cuban border guard, you know how America has a coast guard, essentially the Cuban version of the coast guard, found a boat that was going towards their territorial waters, was well within it, according to the reports that we're getting right now. And then once approaching that boat, according to Cuba, that boat that they approached opened fire upon them. That at least one person on that boat, a speedboat from the United States, maybe Miami, but likely Florida, started opening fire on their ship. And they returned fire, and they ended up killing 4 people and wounding 6 others. And the 6 that they wounded, they then detained. Now, a boat from the United States going into Cuban waters, getting riddled with bullets, and then 6 wounded men, along with 4 dead men, getting detained by Cuban authorities. And that's what we know for sure to be. These are true statements. These are statements of fact. Who opened fire first? That's dependent upon your belief about what the Cuban government said, right? Whether or not, there was any violent motion made, who knows? But the way that the Cuban government is describing it currently is that essentially, and they're viewed terrorists, others would call them rebels, were essentially trying to enter the country get on its coastline so that they could foment unrest and attempt to overthrow the Cuban regime. That seemed to be the idea that they were getting at, that these were rebels that were coming to overthrow the Cuban government, and that they're not the only one that was even trying to attempt to infiltrate the country, that there was somebody else trying to infiltrate the country by plane. And so this was essentially a clash between those, so you would say, Cuban forces loyal to, the Castro legacy, to the legacy of the communist government of 67 years since Batista was overthrown, and those loyal to the downfall of that regime, because these seem to be Cuban citizens, Cubans that might have fled to Florida, then came back. We don't know all the details, but it seems to be Cuban rebels that were living in the United States and were either rebels before or then got convinced by the recent downturn of the government, because the Cuban government's been under immense pressure, thought that now was the time to strike. People might remember that there was that attempted overthrow or attempted private military corporation, boondoggle, clown show, circus that may have been tied to the first Trump admin that happened during the first Trump administration. And I just want to say that right now, we have no clue if it's anything like that. I saw a lot of people putting speculation out there like that, and it could be something similar to that, or it could be, as suggested before, Cuban rebels living in Florida, which is a big hotspot for Cubans outside of Cuba. And since the Cuban government cracked down on dissent in 2021 in the aftermath of protests against the government, there were a lot of young Cubans that chose that opportunity to get the hell out. So the idea of some of those Cubans coming back now, thinking that the government is under immense pressure, now that Nicolas Maduro has been sacked and the Mexican government is not too willing to trade in fuel with the Cuban government under threat of U.S. sanctions, maybe they thought now was the moment. I mean, I want to give you guys a clear picture of how bad it is in Cuba right now. So last year, there was, I would say, I think 5. There were 5 national outages, electricity outages across Cuba through 2025. That's already really bad. What was that related to? Maintenance was one issue. There's a problem with dereliction in public services. For example, there's been a problem with trash pickup for quite a long time in Cuba. But some of it was even stuff outside of the Cuban government's control. People could talk about the longstanding U.S. embargo, but the Venezuelan government had been providing less and less product to the Cuban government, subsidized product, for a while now. Nicolas Maduro's regime was under immense pressure. They were not managing their energy resources particularly well. It was producing less and less economic success for them. And so they had less and less of a cake to share. And so more and more of it was delivered to those who kept the regime going, those who, the people they had to bribe off in order to keep Nicolas Maduro in power, and less could go towards the foreign policy project of the Venezuelan state, which was trying to keep an ally in Cuba afloat. That's not to say that they didn't stop sending that subsidized fuel completely, right? Because after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Venezuela and Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro, they really helped Cuba a lot in producing the fuel that they needed to keep sustaining their economy. I mean, Cuba can only produce 40% of their fuel domestically. 60% has to be imported, and Venezuela did provide that. Now that Maduro's gone and he's been black bag, he's disappeared into the American prison industrial complex. Goodbye. You've fallen into the gears. He's gone. Where are they going to get their fuel? The Venezuelan government under Delcy Rodriguez is not going to be exporting any more fuel to Cuba if the Trump government has anything to say about it, and they've already stopped. So that's one of the big pressures on the Venezuelan government is they can no longer get that fuel from, Cuban government, is they cannot get that fuel from Venezuela. The other pressure is they also can't get that fuel from Mexico anymore either. The current Mexican president's predecessor started selling more and more fuel, giving fuel to Cuba at a good rate for the Cuban government. You could ideological alignment, Mexican national interest, whatever you want to say. He started doing that, passes the reins over the current Mexican president. They continue that legacy. Well, Donald Trump's not too happy about it. He's not too happy about the what he thinks is a too soft policy on the cartels, but he's also not happy about their continued provision of fuel to Cuba. And so now that Maduro's gone down, now that the Venezuelan subsidized product is not going to Cuba, Trump has taken the same moment to say, I'm going to sanction those countries that are selling fuel products to Cuba. And what does that mean? They will sanction the Mexican government if they continue to provide fuel products to Cuba. The Mexican government is kind of in a bind here. Mexican government, of course, is a major trading partner with the United States, and so doesn't want to lose a lot of that trading potential under the threat of, for what? Relatively for what? They can sell some fuel to Cuba, but there's a lot more to the American economy for the Mexican economy than there is in the Cuban economy. So these two big energy pressures make it so that the Cuban government is having a big problem getting the majority of their fuel, which again comes from overseas. So this has led to a few problems in Cuba. Number one, electricity outages. During nighttime in Cuba, the lights are down like 50%. Like 50% compared to what it was before. There's been 11% GDP reduction in 2025. I expect that number to expand in 2026. Trash collection, which was already a problem before, has now become an even bigger problem. For a lot of areas of Cuba, there's no trash collection to the point where people have actually started to burn their trash. The oil is not just needed for electricity and to move trucks around, provide civil services, make the buses work and such. Oil is also needed for a lot of water pumps in Cuban homes. The ways that a lot of these water pumps work is they take water from under the home and they, using electricity, they pump the water up and they come into the home. Then you have your water. But if you are having an electricity outage, then the water pump also does not work, meaning that people have to concentrate their water pumping around the electricity schedule. So it's not just that they don't have electricity to read under a light bulb or browse the web. If the web isn't being cracked down upon by the government, to do whatever. It is also just a basic problem of getting water. And so this has led to a problem of water shortage when there's no electricity. There's been a problem of, not to say that nobody can get water anywhere. It's just you have to go out now to go get water. You don't have electricity. People are starting to cook with wood because of the fuel shortage. It's a real big problem. And this is only escalating as time goes on because there is no clear solution. Now, there is one point in the future that the Cuban government might be waiting for. And that point is there is a Russian boat currently en route to Cuba that is full of Russian fuel. And Dmitry Peskov, Putin's press secretary, has come out and he has released a statement saying that They want to alleviate the humanitarian situation in Cuba. So the Russians are essentially saying that they're on a humanitarian mission, that they care for the well-being of the human race, and that they want to move a bunch of energy product into Cuba so people can continue to pump their water, people can continue to have electricity. A trash collection might not be able to be number one in the world, but maybe there'll be a few functioning trash collectors and people will not have to burn their garbage. And maybe they won't be able to hit, the 100% mark that they need to. But if they produce 40% of it domestically and they get another 20% from Russia, who knows? I think when that boat reaches Cuba, that's going to be a big test. But I'm going to be honest with you. I think this is a test that the Trump government might well end up passing. Remember, this Trump government also interdicted a boat as it was trying to take Venezuelan product out and away. It was coming over to Venezuela to work. It was a Russian ship. It was part of the Black Sea Fleet. Then it fled. Then it switched its flag to Russian to not get attacked by American ships. And what happened? It got boarded anyway. So Trump has already passed this test once. What did the Russian government do in response to that test? Nothing. What's the historical record of when Trump sees that he can get away with an action like that? Does he stop taking that action if he thinks it benefits him? No, he does not stop taking that action. He likes to be a predatory hegemon. If he can squeeze that little bit more out, he will. Now, he doesn't tend to squeeze countries that have more power like Russia, but Russia doesn't have that much power in Latin America. And if you were to read the national security document, and I know you don't put too much weight into an American national security document necessarily, this national security document is more narrow and does seem to so far align, generally speaking, kind of 50 to maybe 60%, barely passing grade with what Trump is advocating for and actually pursuing in his foreign policy. And that includes what he has called the Monroe Doctrine, which is a play on, of course, the Monroe Doctrine, an assertion that the United States will not allow any other country to get a foothold in South America because of security concerns. They don't want Russia or China, or back in the day, France, the United Kingdom, or whatever power it would be, from having a major holding in South America in order to possibly threaten the United States. That we want to have the full benefits of the geographic advantages that having the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean separating us from our main adversaries allows us to have. Right? We don't have the same national security concerns of the Estonians, of the Latvians, of the Lithuanians, of the Ukrainians, of the whoever, right? Of the Taiwanese, of the Finns, Ethiopia, Eritrea. We don't have those same concerns. And the United States would like to keep it that way, and that's what Trump was putting forward. But his Monroe Doctrine has also included blackbagging the Venezuelan president. It has also included strengthening the embargo to basically a full embargo, not just a partial embargo, but to a full embargo of Cuba. It has shown the United States amassing one of the largest fleets in our in our long and storied history in Latin America, one of the largest fleets ever to try to, and when I say ever, I mean in that region. So it looks like he's taking a lot of the physical moves to pursue the Monroe Doctrine. So if that ship comes up, I would not be surprised if the United States either tells it to go home or straight up just boards it again to just send the message home. This is the United States territory. We will not be messed with. Do not come this way. We will take your boats. Do not play with us. I think this will be a test, but I think this is a test that I wouldn't be surprised if Trump passed, because he has passed a similar test before and it would align with his national security strategy. And I think past that point, if the Trump administration passed that test, then I do not see any light at the end of the tunnel for the Cuban government. And when you pair that moment, that test, with this shooting of these people on this boat, where now we have the Secretary of State of the United States, Marco Rubio, who we know wants to get rid of the Cuban regime, asking for a full investigation, wants to probably have agents on the ground investigating what happened to these people. Who are these people? What happened? Did they really open first? Do we have any video footage? Let's look at the video footage on the phones of the Coast Guard people, the Cuban Coast Guard people that's available. Let's look at X, Y, and Z. I mean, this is a potential point of escalation where the Cubans are at a particularly disadvantaged economic position. So I would say that there is probably a lot of concern in Havana right now, and probably a lot of deserved concern amongst the authorities in Havana about the continuance of their government. And I think that's part of the reason why we're hearing rumors, and I'm saying this is rumors, there are sources, but I mean, anonymous reporting this, anonymous reporting that. But the rumor is that American officials have spoken to the grandson of Fidel Castro, and that they've been speaking to other members of that political elite, of that political dynasty, and not only in the back rooms and parts of South America, but like specifically in Cuba, like multiple different members of the family, different members of the administration. Of course, like this does not replace Raul Castro. I mean, he's 94 years old. He's an old man, but he ultimately is a big decision maker there, and nothing's going to happen in Cuba that he is not aware of. But the fact that these conversations are happening in the first place probably is some recognition from the Cuban government that they are not in a position where time is on their side, that they can't just wait this out and hope that the American government backs off, or that, we can wait 3 years for another election to happen. Maybe things will change. I think they recognize that they can't do that 3 years is a long way away, especially if you've got no fuel coming in from Venezuela, no fuel coming in from Mexico. And the situation is actively deteriorating, where even last year there was a GDP decrease of 11%. So I think once that Russian boat turns around, at best for the Russians, likely, I think once that happens, the Cubans are going to have to speed up the pace of negotiations, because I don't think the current pace of negotiations really matches the pace of deterioration of the Cuban economy. I think that's just how it is right now. I mean, I'm not trying to put any moral aspersions on it. I'm just describing the forces. If I see a wave moving in one direction, me describing the direction of that wave moving is not a moral aspersion on the wave. It is not a moral compliment to the wave. It is just describing that right now the Cuban government is probably facing the most pressure it has ever felt. And 2021, it felt a lot of pressure. These forms of pressure are not easily removed.